Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening, and my name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our, in this instance, I mean myself and anyone whose article I may happen to read who has views that are in that article, if you know what I mean. Or maybe you don't. I don't know. Anyway, like I said, welcome. I don't think I was here last week. Or was I here last week? I have no idea. I can't even remember. That's how long ago it was. 1 week, and I've already forgotten whether I was here. Maybe I was here. Maybe I was not. That's a mystery that only you can solve, because you would know, and I wouldn't, because I don't remember. They all run together to me after a while. Anyway. The theme of the show is immigration, as you may remember. Or you may have gleaned that from the title, CU Immigration. We talk about immigration here in CU, Champaign-Urbana, but we talk about it all over the country and indeed all over the world, because it all affects itself. That makes no sense. What's going on there affects what's going on here. I mean, people's views about immigration tend to be catching, if you know what I mean, and they go from place to place, and so it's all kind of interconnected, and also because immigration is people moving from country to country. So what's going on in some other country affects who's coming here, what they're thinking about coming here, what's going on, all those different things. So I'm not sure where to start here. Well, let's start with the worst bad news, the baddest of the bad news. I don't know. Anyway, this is from the Washington Post, and I just was reading this. It's entitled, Trump Tells GOP Senators Don't Include Dreamers Fix in Year-End Spending Bill. So, well, I'll just read it, and then we can talk about it. So President Trump told Republican senators Thursday not to allow a solution addressing the legal status of Dreamers to be part of a must-pass year-end spending bill, raising the stakes for year-end negotiations that could force a government shutdown or finally resolve an emotionally fraught element of immigration policy. Democrats are threatening to withhold support for spending legislation that needs to be passed by December 9th unless Congress passes legal protections for hundreds of thousands of children of undocumented immigrants who have benefited from an Obama-era program temporarily protecting them from deportation. In recent weeks, Democrats have pushed for an up or down vote on the DREAM Act, a bill with bipartisan support that would grant Dreamers permanent legal protections and set many of them on a years-long path to U.S. citizenship. If a vote isn't held, many Democrats are threatening to withhold their votes for the spending legislation. That's not an empty threat, based on recent history. Republican leaders for years have relied on Democrats to help approve spending bills when dozens of fiscal conservatives have withheld support over spending levels. Trump announced in December that he will end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program in March, giving Congress 6 months to approve plans to protect or deport the hundreds of thousands of young people benefiting from the program. His request Thursday to keep the issue out of spending legislation could set up a high-stakes spending showdown in early December if GOP leaders don't take up immigration legislation beforehand. Senator David Perdue, a Republican, who attended the meeting, said that Trump would prefer it not to be part of a year-end grand bargain of any sort, that it should be debated on its own merit. Trump has vacillated on immigration issues throughout the year, vowing to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border before reneging under pressure from his own party, calling for passage of conservative immigration proposals that would limit legal migration, but then meeting with top Democratic leaders and vowing to work with them on bipartisan solutions. But when pressed to clarify Trump's requests, Perdue said the president was insistent. Do you know this president? He made it very clear what he wants. He does not want to see it in any form of year-end bill. He was emphatic about that, Perdue said. The Thursday morning meeting also included Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn of Texas, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Charles Grassley, and Senators Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, James Lankford, and Tom Tillis. Trump said the Dreamers issue shouldn't be attached to any must-pass piece of legislation in 2017, Cotton said. Cotton and Perdue are pushing legislation to limit legal immigration and end policies permitting chain migration. But Cornyn and Graham are among those opposed to their bill. Cotton said Thursday that GOP leaders might opt instead to take up a narrower bill to address the legal status of Dreamers, eliminate chain migration, and bolster border security. If you keep trying to add more and more to the bill, it will collapse under its own weight, he said. But Cotton didn't specify what border security measures might be included in the legislation. I personally think we need a wall. Walls work. Fences work. That's why we have one around the White House. That's why people have them around their backyard, Cotton said. But the White House fence has been breached several times in recent years, compelling the U.S. Park Service to make plans to install a higher, more fortified barrier. Republican leadership aides confirmed the contents of Thursday's White House meeting. Top Democrats dismissed Trump's requests, saying that they will maintain leverage over the spending talks and are building strong support for the DREAM Act. We're going to do everything we can to pass the bill, but we expect it will pass because we have a lot of Republican support for this bill, and I think it is going to be better than people think, no matter what Donald Trump says on one given day or another, Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer told reporters. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi of California added that Republicans can talk to themselves in the mirror all they want, but the fact is that the vote is the currency of the realm, and Republicans frequently find themselves holding an empty wallet. I like that. That's a nice, clever little statement there. So it seems, I think forgot what the word I was going to use. The operative term, the operative moment, I don't know, my brain just went blank. The key point here that kind of sneaks through, I can't find it. All right, I'm going back and forth here and trying to do this and trying to talk at the same time. I can't find. Anyway, somewhere in here, the sneaky point that comes through is that Trump doesn't want this to be attached to any must-pass legislation, because obviously that gets it passed, because the legislation must pass, and then he doesn't get to mess around with it and use it as a bargaining chip, which is exactly why he ended DACA in the first place. So, I mean, it's not really that surprising that he would do this. And so the whole point about how it should be debated on its own merit, that's just persiflage, falderall, or something like that. I mean, that's just an attempt to make it sound like something other than a ploy, which is what it is. He wants this to stand on its own because he wants it to be something where, like, well, they have to say yes, and so we'll just, get as many concessions out of them as possible on this in order to get to that yes, and that's why he did it in the first place. So that's why they want to avoid it, I think. That's my opinion. But what do I know? I don't know anything. What Article not found. That's pretty annoying. So along the same track, let's take another look at this from Politico. Oh, I'm yawning. Okay. It's just really warm in here. It makes me want to take a nap every time I come here. It's like, oh, okay, it's nap time. Anyway, excuse me. It's also very dry. This is entitled "Liberal Senate Dems Embrace Shutdown Showdown Over Dreamers." I like that. Shutdown showdown. So the Senate Democrats' Hell No caucus is saying hell yes to a shutdown showdown over dreamers. Democrats have pressed Republicans to pass legislation by the end of the year to continue the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which grants hundreds of thousands of young, undocumented immigrants legal protections that President Donald Trump has vowed to end. But in a White House meeting with Senate Republicans on Thursday, Trump stressed that he did not want to see a DACA fix attached to must-pass legislation such as a government spending bill. That's provoking the more liberal cohort of the Senate Democratic caucus, particularly those eyeing the presidency in 2020, to warn that the GOP will need to deal on immigration in a year-end bill or Republicans won't get their votes. Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat, California, declared in a news conference last week that she wouldn't vote for a spending package if the future of DACA was not resolved by then. Hours after the White House meeting concluded Thursday, Senator Elizabeth Warren, also a Democrat, this time from Massachusetts, made a similar vow, and Bernie Sanders followed suit on Friday. Trump must make good on his promise to sign a bill protecting dreamers, tweeted Sanders, who ran for the Democratic presidential nomination. I won't vote for any spending bill without a permanent DACA fix. And Senator Cory Booker said in a statement to Politico on Friday that the New Jersey Democrat will also not support a year-end spending bill if it wasn't paired with relief for dreamers, saying Trump's move to end DACA has caused chaos and uncertainty for hundreds of thousands of young undocumented immigrants. These are hardworking young people who were brought to this country as kids by their parents. They don't know any other home but the United States, Booker said. I want solutions to protect these kids and won't vote for a spending bill that doesn't include one. The threats from the Senate Democrats' progressive wing have yet to fully trickle down to the broader caucus, but the latest posturing from liberals heightens the prospects of a shutdown standoff in December, as Republicans almost always need a non-insignificant swath of Democratic votes to keep the federal government running. Democratic leaders clearly recognize the leverage they hold in the spending fight, yet some senior Senate Democrats have been careful not to make explicit threats of a funding showdown as Republicans work quietly to hammer out a potential DACA deal that can pick up conservative support and Democratic votes. GOP leaders say they won't simply pass legislation granting dreamers legal status. It needs to be married with various border security and enforcement measures, as well as some curbs on legal immigration for it to clear the Republican-controlled Congress, they say. And other liberal Democratic senators haven't been as quick to promise they would use their vote in favor of spending bill as leverage. Senator Gillibrand thinks it's inhumane to allow the future of our DACA kids to twist uncertainly in the wind, a spokesman for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand said. She doesn't think we should wait until the end of the year to pass a clean DACA bill. In an interview last week, Senator Chris Murphy, also a Democrat, this time from Connecticut, said, I might vote against a funding bill if the fate of DACA remained unresolved. I don't know how I'd sleep at night if I didn't do everything possible to protect these kids, said Murphy, another senator mentioned in 2020 presidential chatter. But he acknowledged that shutdown threats could also hold some political risks for Democrats. I think the danger of Democrats starting to say they won't vote for the spending bill if DACA isn't attached is that it relieves Republicans of responsibility, Murphy said. And Republicans are going to pay the moral and political price if these kids end up getting kicked out of the country. So, yeah, all right. Yeah. So we see the situation developing here. I'm trying to think beneath the surface. You know, the surface is one thing, but beneath the surface is the other. So the political posturing, maneuvering here is that Republicans are wanting, they've got this cudgel with DACA that they can hold over the heads of Democrats and say, oh, well, you know, we'd like to help you out here. We'd love to fix this. We think it's important to fix. But there are some things that we need to get along with it that we need you to vote for in order to give us, cover for doing these things that are unpopular and very cruel, but that we really like a lot. Like building a border wall and, you know, all this other, and curbing legal immigration and all this other stuff. So that's their ploy. That's what they're working on here. And so they're trying to keep DACA out of this stuff. Let's just talk about it by itself. This deserves to be discussed, you know, as a standalone issue, blah, blah, blah. You know, they created this situation, they created a crisis, and now in order to resolve it, there are certain concessions that need to be made in order for a positive resolution. I mean, it's a classic kind of ploy. So that's their position on one end. On the other side, Democrats are like, okay, well, spending bills coming up. You know, it has to be passed or the government shuts down. And we're saying, all right, well, we'll just, DACA has to be a part of it or we're not voting for it. And that's their cudgel that they're holding over the head. So everybody's trying to hold their cudgel a little higher over the head of the other side to see who can win. It should be interesting. I really hope they can figure this out. DACA is all over the place. It's the next two stories that I was going to read are both about DACA. It's a big deal. It's not the only deal, though. I mean, there's other stuff going on. Immigration generally is threatened in all sorts of ways by all sorts of people, and, well, all sorts of Republicans anyway. But be that as it may, I mean, immigration generally is under attack in this country. And it's not because there's something wrong with the situation created by immigration. It is purely and entirely because someone has ginned up resistance to immigration, and now that is a popular issue for the conservative side of the political spectrum. They can say, oh, well, we've got to take care of this, and we've got to do that, and we've got to shut this down, and we've got to build that, and we've got to, do all these different things. All these things in order to deal with a problem that doesn't actually exist. And on the other side, you just simply have folks who are trying to say, okay, lives are at stake here. Happiness, comfort, security, stability, all these things are at stake for all sorts of people. We just want to fix it so we can get on to dealing with the real problems of the country. And that's kind of the standoff you have. And the thing is, they are not comparable. One is purely manipulation. It's purely creating a problem where none exists and demanding all sorts of drastic responses to it, all for the sake of appealing to the prejudices of people that don't really understand the problem in the first place. So that brings us to, I'll move into our next story here, because here are some people who are seriously affected by this situation. This is from Austin, Texas. It's entitled, "For Black DACA Recipients in Texas, It Often Feels Impossible to Exist." So, Olawatosi Shusi, Toyosi for short, stands observant, her hands clasped in the middle of a crowd of more than 40 people in the basement of Hogg Auditorium. The 21-year-old is showcasing a collection of designs for Fest Africa, Africa Uncut, the Texas African Student Organization's annual cultural showcase. Shusi is a chemical engineering major with a concentration in textiles at UT Austin. She says she wants to one day create wearable technology to improve everyday life, like clothing to repel mosquitoes in malarial zones. She's set to graduate in December, and she's looking for a job, but she has one pressing issue while talking to recruiters. I kind of avoided the whole sponsorship question, Shusi says. I kind of wanted them to like me first, and then I'll bring up sponsorship. Shusi needs sponsorship, my tongue isn't working well, in order to work in the U.S. after she graduates. She's one of fewer than 2% of black immigrants receiving DACA protections. The Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals program shields from deportation immigrants brought to the U.S. illegally as children, but the Trump administration rescinded the program in September. Shusi's DACA status is set to expire in September 2018, but she can't renew it. Her parents brought her to the U.S. from Nigeria when she was just 3. Her father was studying IT on a student visa and worked in Houston for a while. But after the 2008 recession, his employer wouldn't keep sponsoring his visa. Shusi's parents applied for green cards in 2001, but still haven't received them. Because they were born in the U.S., her 10 and 17-year-old brother have Social Security numbers. Shusi, a little typo there. She went from Shusi to sushi. Somebody missed that. Anyway, Shusi says she thought not having a Social Security number and not being able to get a driver's license were normal things teenagers dealt with. My parents didn't really tell me that I was undocumented, she says. And so when I was filling all of these forms out to apply for DACA, that's when I realized, oh, this is different. After that awareness came fear and isolation. When they talk about undocumented immigrants, Shusi says, they don't talk about black undocumented immigrants. Only 7% of the 22 million undocumented people in the U.S. are black, though not all of them are from Africa. Texas is home to the third largest African-born population. The state also saw the greatest increase in population, 111% from 2000 to 2010. After the administration announced it was rescinding DACA, Shusi went to an informational meeting hosted by the University Leadership Initiative, an immigration organization on campus. That's where she met Deborah Alemu, the only other black immigrant in the room of about 100 people. We felt the need to pull something together that embraced both worlds of being undocumented and black and navigating living in the United States with those identities, says Alemu, membership coordinated for UndocuBlack, a network of undocumented black people. Alemu, whose family is originally from Ethiopia, says the organization was formed because black immigrants were being ignored. It often feels that it is impossible to exist as a black undocumented person, she says, because there are no checkboxes for you. UndocuBlack formed in Miami last year. There are chapters in Los Angeles, New York City, and in Austin. Alemu says the organization provides healthcare clinics, legal clinics, and information, but it can sometimes be a challenge in places like Texas. There are certainly black immigrants who speak Spanish, but there's a population that doesn't as well. So to find resources that are accessible to our communities has been an uphill battle, she says. Robert Painter is the director of pro bono programs and communication at American Gateways, which provides legal services and community outreach to low-income immigrants in Central Texas. He says language barriers can create delays for many immigrants, especially those trying to tap into social services. Having culturally competent resources can be a challenge because the vast majority of immigrants come from South America, Central America, and Mexico, he says. Maybe not so much of the legal services, but other social services are more geared to that population. Painter says organizations need to do a better job of reaching out to smaller immigrant populations. If we think that there's a particular community that is especially vulnerable to immigration enforcement or violation of their due process rights because of the color of their skin, he says, that's a problem we ought to be paying attention to. Alemu says that's exactly what she's advocating for. That may seem innocent, she says. It might seem coincidental and accidental, but it comes down to influential orgs getting a say in policies and that negatively impacting us. According to the State of Black Immigration study by the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, about 20% of immigrants facing detention on criminal grounds are black. Alemu calls this number astounding. A lot of times people ask if citizenship is the goal, and I say no, she says. You've got black citizens living in the United States who still don't have full dignity and full rights. Shusi says her parents plan to wait until her brother turns 21 so he can file for citizenship for them. Once they become citizens, they can file for Shusi if she hasn't found a job to sponsor her. This could take decades. America's the only place I know, and I love this country, and it just hurts because this country hates me and I don't know why, she says. I'm always going to be limited because of my status, and that just sucks. Unless Congress makes a decision soon, she'll have to make a plan for after her DACA protection expires September 19th. She says she hasn't been to Nigeria since she was a toddler. Despite all this stuff going on, you can't take away the fact that I have my education, you know, she says. So I will celebrate because I am proud of myself and proud of what I accomplished. But I also want to have a job. Yeah, and that just goes to show just one example of the many, many examples of why you can't take all DACA students or all immigrants or all anybody and say, oh, this is the problem that they face, and here's how we deal with it. There are so many individual ways that people end up in this place. I mean, the story is similar. I've heard other stories from other DACA recipients, brought here as a child, grew up here, you know, mixed status family, some undocumented, some citizens, you know, trying to navigate all of that and build something out of it. That was where the whole idea for DAPA came from. All right, we've got this deferred action for the children. Let's do deferred action for the parents to keep the families together. But of course, no, they had to fight that too. There's our imaginary problem with all these immigrants who are coming here and doing whatever mischief they're doing that apparently makes them public enemy number one. But here you have someone whose situation is unique and yet similar to the other DACA recipients, who just needs someone somewhere to say, okay, let's fix this. Let's take care of these kids. They'll be okay. That's all we need. And the fact that you have a whole section of the government who's trying to use this crisis, and it is a crisis. I mean, these people, it would be just unconscionable to send these young people away. And I guess that's why DACA gets so much news and so much press, and it's such a big deal, and why so many people point to that as, you know, here's the issue we need to work on.